for decades, the official story of mankind's absolute greatest technological achievement seemed completely bulletproof.
Right. Eternally preserved.
Exactly. Eternally preserved for future generations.
Right.
I mean, when we think of the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, we instinctively imagine this this pristine, untouchable vault deep within NASA.
Like a climate-controlled room somewhere.
Yeah, a room where the original high-definition telemetry tapes are just locked away like the crown jewels, right?
Yeah.
Perfectly safe for all of human history. But according to the available sources we are analyzing for this deep dive today, that official narrative has a massive, honestly terrifying flaw.
It really does.
The original high-resolution telemetry tapes of humanity's first steps on another world,
Right.
they don't exist anymore. They were literally erased and reused.
It is a staggering realization. And I think what makes it so unsettling is just the sheer, the banality of how it happened. Because, I mean, this wasn't an act of sabotage. It wasn't some grand conspiracy to hide the truth from the public. It was a mundane, bureaucratic, administrative decision.
Someone just checking a box on a form.
Exactly. NASA simply needed blank magnetic tapes for later satellite missions in, I think, the early 1980s. Tapes were expensive back then, storage was limited, and the Apollo 11 telemetry tapes were they were simply pulled from the shelf and recorded over.
I'm still struggling to even wrap my head around that.
I know. And the iconic, ghostly video of Neil Armstrong taking that first step, the video that the entire world has watched for half a century, that is actually a significantly degraded later copy.
Wait, really? The one we always see on TV?
Yes, it is literally a recording of a television monitor that was playing a live, already compressed feed. The absolute highest quality original raw data of our first steps on another world is just permanently gone.
I mean, we literally lost the original raw video of mankind's greatest achievement because someone needed a blank tape.
Basically, yes.
I used to assume major institutions had foolproof safeguards for this kind of thing,
Yeah.
It's like discovering the Library of Alexandria wasn't burned by invading armies, but just like casually thrown into a dumpster by a city planner who needed to make room for a parking lot.
That is precisely the scale of the loss. And the deeper you look into the archives of that era, the more you realize it is absolutely not an isolated incident.
And there's more.
Oh, yeah. Look at the 1976 Viking Mars landing. NASA possessed magnetic tapes full of incredibly valuable, irreplaceable data from that mission. But for over a decade, those tapes just sat in storage, completely unreadable.
Wait, unreadable how? Like, did the magnetic tape physically degrade or melt or something?
No, the physical tape was actually intact, but the data architecture itself was completely opaque.
What do you mean?
Well, the digital format used to encode the magnetic signals was just entirely unknown to modern systems. The original paper documentation explaining the formatting was missing, and the original programmers who built the encoding systems had either, died, retired, or just left the agency.
Oh, wow. So they had the data, but no way to understand it.
Right. You have to understand, these weren't standard text files. This was highly custom-built telemetry encoding. It took months of agonizing manual reverse engineering just to puzzle through the raw magnetic pulses.
Just guessing at what the signals meant.
Literally guessing at parity bits and block lengths, trying to figure out how the original 1970s recording machines even functioned before they could extract a single line of readable data.
That completely shatters this underlying assumption we have about the modern era. I mean, we look back at history, say the early cinema industry, and we judge them so harshly.
We really do.
We think, how could they be so careless? Because roughly 75% of all American silent films made prior to 1930 are completely lost to history.
Gone forever.
Yeah. And yes, the physical nitrate film they used was incredibly flammable, but that wasn't even the main cause of the loss. Mostly, the film was just melted down and recycled for the silver content and the chemical emulsion. Or is just left to rot in unventilated vaults because studio executives decided that long-term storage was a waste of money.
Right. It was a financial decision.
Exactly. And we look at that and think we are so much more evolved today because everything we have is supposedly stored safely in the cloud.
But what is fascinating and deeply concerning, honestly, is the illusion of digital permanence. We are making the exact same arrogant assumption those early film executives made.
How so?
Well, we've simply replaced highly flammable cellulose nitrate film with rapidly degrading plastic servers, complex proprietary software, and fragile magnetic platters.
Hardware is just as vulnerable.
It is. And to give you a sense of the scale of this assumption, just consider the sheer volume of data we are generating as a species right now. In the year 2010, the entire world produced about 2 zettabytes of data. According to the projections in our sources, this year alone, we will produce 181 zettabytes.
Okay, let's slow down for a second. 181 zettabytes. I know a terabyte is a big hard drive. I know a petabyte is massive. What even is a zettabyte?
A single zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes.
1 trillion. Wow.
It is an information explosion that dwarfs anything in the recorded history of human civilization. We are generating more data in a single afternoon than humanity generated in the previous 5,000 years combined.
That is just, it's unfathomable.
But because this data is invisible, because it exists merely as ones and zeros floating in vast, hyper-cooled server farms that we never actually physically see, we just assume it is immortal.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind, but we assume it's safe.
Exactly. The reality, which archivists and data scientists are desperately sounding the alarm on, is that we might actually be entering the most fragile era of human memory. We are trusting our entire civilization's historical record to mediums that require constant, active, massive electrical life support just to survive.
If the underlying infrastructure keeping all of this alive is that fragile, then we have a major problem. And I think this raises a deeply important question for you, listening right now. If our most crucial historical data, like the raw telemetry of the moon landing, is vanishing, what is happening to the media, the news, the personal memories, and the culture you interact with every single day?
That is the central mystery we are investigating today, because we are looking at a convergence of technological fragility, deliberate corporate strategy, and complex legal maneuvering that is systematically erasing our digital footprint.
And it starts with a fundamental structural shift in how we consume and possess media.
Right. It does.
Let's talk about that shift, because the verified timeline of how we abandon ownership in exchange for convenience is happening right in front of our eyes. I mean, physical media is being systematically eradicated from the public sphere.
You see it everywhere.
Yeah. Best Buy, which was a titan of physical electronics and media for decades, they've stopped selling DVDs and Blu-rays entirely. Target and Walmart have drastically reduced their shelf space for physical discs, basically relegating them to tiny hidden end caps.
It's just a sliver of what it used to be.
Exactly. Even Sony, the company that heavily funded and practically invented the Blu-ray format, is actively scaling back its production of physical disc players.
And the narrative we were sold to justify all of this was that it represented progress.
Right.
The tech industry told us that digital is cleaner, it doesn't clutter up your living room shelves, and streaming is just infinitely more convenient. You just press a button on a remote and you instantly have thousands of movies.
Which, to be fair, is very convenient.
It is. But if we look at the structural reality, you have to examine the true financial motivation behind this transition. It was never about saving the consumer shelf space. It was about fundamentally restructuring the entire economy around corporate recurring revenue.
Right, the transition from a product to a service. I mean, if I go out and buy a 4K Blu-ray movie for $25, the movie studio gets my money exactly once.
Just once.
I take that plastic disc home, I put it on my shelf, and I can watch it 1,000 times for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I can lend it to a friend. I can sell it at a garage sale.
You own it.
I own it. But if I pay $15 a month indefinitely for a subscription streaming service, they own my wallet forever. Access has become the actual product. And I feel like people really don't realize what they traded away for that access.
They traded away a lot.
We surrendered true ownership, obviously, but we also surrendered quality. We gave up superior uncompressed picture quality and lossless audio just to get a lower quality, heavily compressed digital feed that artifacts and buffers the second your Wi-Fi drops a packet.
The technical degradation of the art itself is a major part of this. I mean, a physical 4K disc can output data at 100 megabits per second. That delivers pristine color grading and uncompressed surround sound.
It looks amazing.
It does. But a top-tier streaming service, that might top out at maybe 15 to 25 megabits per second. They are stripping away massive amounts of visual and audio data just to squeeze it through the internet pipe.
Just to make it fit.
Right. But even beyond the corporate control and the loss of quality, the underlying physical reality of digital media storage is horrifyingly fragile. We have this psychological bias that digital somehow means permanent.
Yeah, we really do.
But let's look at the actual lifespan of our physical storage mediums. Recordable CDs and DVDs, the dye layer that actually holds the data degrades rapidly.
How fast are we talking?
Depending on storage conditions, they last maybe 5 to 10 years before the polycarbonate plastic breaks down and the aluminum reflective layer begins to oxidize. Archivists actually call this process disk rot.
5 to 10 years, that's nothing.
It's nothing. And what about hard disks? The spinning magnetic platters that hold the vast majority of the world's consumer data? You're lucky if you get 20 to 30 years out of them before the mechanical arms fail or the magnetic polarity just naturally decays.
And it's not just the hardware sitting in our homes failing. It's the architecture of the internet itself. According to a massive study by the Pew Research Center we looked at, a quarter of all web pages that existed between 2013 and 2023 are completely dead.
A full 25%.
That's a phenomenon called link rot. You click a bookmark you saved just a few years ago, and you don't get the article. You get a 404 error. The server is gone, the domain registration expired, and the data is completely vaporized.
It highlights the fragility of the hyperlink, which is the foundational building block of the web.
Right.
A hyperlink is just a pointer. It basically says, go to this specific server, find this specific directory, and load this specific file. If any one of those three things changes, like the server is unplugged, if the folder is renamed, or if the company hosting it goes bankrupt, the pointer just points to a black hole.
I'm trying to visualize this in the real world. Think about it this way. You would never spend thousands of dollars to fill a beautiful oak bookshelf in your living room with rare first edition books if you knew that a tech billionaire held a remote control that could magically vaporize those books from your house while you sleep.
Right, you'd never agree to that.
You would never accept those terms in the physical world.
Mm.
But that is exactly what we do with digital media. We build these massive digital libraries on platforms we don't control, just trusting they will always be there.
Which means convenience essentially became a Trojan horse for absolute dependence. As long as physical media existed alongside streaming, the consumer had leverage in the market. You had a choice.
Like you could walk away.
Exactly. But once there are no physical alternatives, corporations completely dictate the rules of access. They decide what history is profitable to keep on the active servers and what history gets quietly deleted to save on hosting costs.
Okay, so if hardware failing is an accident of time and link rot is just the internet changing, what happens when the underlying technology itself begins to silently decay from the inside out?
This is where it gets really interesting.
This brings us to a major historical anomaly in our sources. And honestly, this is where the story gets genuinely unsettling for me. At first, this might seem like a quirky tech story from the 80s, but the implications for what is happening right now in our modern server farms are massive.
Let's talk about the BBC Domesday Project of 1986.
Right. So for some historical context for the listener, in the year 1086, William the Conqueror commissioned the original Domesday Book. It was this massive, incredibly comprehensive survey of land ownership, resources, livestock, and settlements across all of England.
A complete snapshot of a civilization.
Exactly. Fast forward 900 years to 1986, and the BBC decides to commemorate this anniversary by creating a modern, cutting-edge digital version. The 1986 Domesday Project was this enormous multimedia undertaking. They enlisted over 1 million volunteers, mostly schoolchildren and local citizens, gathering thousands of photos, maps, essays, and statistics about everyday British life.
It was a massive civic effort.
Huge. And they encoded all of it onto these state-of-the-art interactive 12-inch laser discs.
And here is the paradox that keeps archivists awake at night. The original 1086 Domesday Book, written by monks on animal parchment in the 11th century, is perfectly readable today.
Still readable.
You can literally walk into the National Archives in the UK, look at the ink, and read the Latin words right now. But the 1986 digital version, within just 15 years, it became completely obsolete and unreadable.
15 years. Compared to 900 years for literal dried animal skin?
Okay.
I mean, how does a $1 million technological marvel die in a decade and a half?
Well, the reason why is critical to understand because it explains the exact danger we face today. It wasn't just that the physical laser discs degraded, although, optical media does degrade.
Right, like the disk rot we talked about.
Exactly. But the main issue was that the format was heavily proprietary. They used a specific format called LV-ROM, which required highly specific microcomputers, the BBC Master computers, attached to a very specific Philips Laserdisc player.
Oh, man.
And it used an incredibly specific software ecosystem to read and interpret the data on those disks. When the 90s arrived, that hardware just vanished from the market. The computers broke down, the specific microchips were no longer manufactured, the software was abandoned by the developers, and the data became locked behind an impenetrable wall of technological obsolescence.
I remember reading in the sources about how they eventually recovered it. The Chameleon Project, I think.
Yes, the Chameleon Project. It was a joint effort between the universities of Michigan and Leeds, and it took a massive, heroic engineering effort just to rescue that data so it could be viewed on a standard modern PC.
They couldn't just plug the disk in, right?
No, not at all. They had to write incredibly complex emulation software that tricked a modern computer into behaving exactly like the silicon architecture of a 1986 BBC Master microcomputer.
Wow.
They had to match its exact processing speeds and instruction sets just to get the files to even open.
That is insane. I'm building this metaphor in my head. It's like we invented the most advanced, complex language in the universe, but we entirely forgot to build a Rosetta Stone to leave behind for the next generation.
That's exactly what it's like.
If you find a 900-year-old book in a cave, you just open it, look at it, and even if you don't speak the language, you can see the letters. If you find a 15-year-old encrypted hard drive in a desk drawer, you might as well have found a heavy rock.
Yeah.
It is literally just a paperweight without the exact software ecosystem required to translate it.
That is a perfect analogy, and it leads us directly to a concept data scientists call the digital dark age. Obsolescence isn't just about a hard drive physically breaking in half. It's about the entire software ecosystem dying.
The environment around the file.
Right. We tend to think of digital archives as static containers, like a cardboard box full of paper. But a digital file is not a static object. A digital file is essentially a script, and it requires a performance by a software program to be understood.
A performance. I like that.
When the software dies, the performance ends. The underlying binary data might still be on the disk, but it's meaningless noise to us.
Wait, I want to dig into that meaningless noise aspect because the sources talk about something called bit rot, and this completely changed how I view my own hard drives. What exactly is bit rot? How does data just spontaneously rot?
Bit rot, technically known as silent data corruption, is a phenomenon where the ones and more stored on physical media subtly flip or degrade over time without any human intervention.
Just on their own?
Yes, and it happens due to actual physical environmental factors. We are talking about magnetic decay on spinning platters, microscopic hardware faults in the silicon, and incredibly cosmic rays.
Wait, cosmic rays, like from space?
Yes, literally from space. High-energy protons originating from supernovas outside our solar system continuously bombard the Earth.
You're kidding.
No, it's a documented scientific phenomenon. Most are blocked by the atmosphere, but some make it all the way to the surface. When one of these high-energy particles passes through a data center and strikes the silicon lattice of a memory chip, it can create a microscopic electrical charge.
And that does what?
Well, if it hits a memory cell capacitor just right, that charge is enough to flip a transistor from a 0 to a 1. This is called a single event upset.
A particle from a supernova can change a 0 to a 1 on my hard drive. That is wild.
It is. And in 2021, both Google and Facebook actually issued urgent warnings to the global developer community about this exact phenomenon. Data is corrupting silently within massive storage systems, and because it happens at the atomic level, the errors spread through the network before any human or diagnostic tool even notices. It's an insidious, slow-motion erasure of our digital reality.
That is genuinely terrifying. But what happens when you combine that natural cosmic degradation with human security measures? Like encryption. We are always told to encrypt everything to keep it safe from hackers, right?
Right, but when you add encryption into the mix, bit rot goes from being a nuisance to an absolute catastrophe.
How so?
Think about it. If a regular unencrypted text file suffers a flipped bit from a cosmic ray, maybe one letter in a single word gets garbled, right? You can still read the remaining 99% of the document perfectly fine.
Right, it's just a typo at that point.
Exactly. But modern security uses block cipher encryption, like AES. These algorithms rely on an avalanche effect, where every single bit is mathematically dependent on the surrounding bits. If an encrypted file suffers even a single flip bit of rot, or if the specific software key needed to decode it is lost in some system update, the entire block of data, and often the entire file, decrypts into complete unrecoverable random noise.
For by trying to perfectly secure the data, we've actually ensured that if even a microscopic fraction of it degrades, the entire thing self-destructs. I mean, the source material mentions the massive computing power it took to crack a mechanically generated, brief submarine tactical message from World War II. It took a global distributed computing project to read just a few sentences. Imagine trying to read an encrypted, bit-rotted, proprietary hard drive 50 years from now?
It would be mathematically and practically impossible. And this technical decay is terrifying enough on its own. It's a natural physical consequence of the medium we've chosen to build our modern civilization upon.
But if hardware failing and bit rot are accidents of technology, what happens when companies use that fragility to their advantage? What happens when erasure is a deliberate legal strategy? I want to pivot here because the investigative reality of corporate erasure introduces a concept that legal scholars are calling digital feudalism.
Yes, the Doomsday Project was a technical failure of foresight. But what we are seeing now in the corporate sphere are intentional, calculated acts of digital destruction.
Deliberate erasure.
Consider what happened recently to the renowned polling and data journalism site 538. The Walt Disney Company had owned the site and its massive archives for over a decade. But after founder Nate Silver left and the staff was laid off, Disney executives decided the site was no longer an active asset.
Because it wasn't making them money right that second.
Exactly. It wasn't generating new daily journalism, and therefore it wasn't driving major advertising revenue.
So what did they do? I mean, they didn't archive it. They didn't donate the database to a university library or a historical society. They completely wiped the archive from the internet.
It's just gone.
Years of incredibly complex data modeling, political analysis, historical polling records, just permanently deleted to save a microscopic amount on server hosting costs.
And it is not just journalism either. Look at the entertainment industry. After the massive corporate merger that formed Warner Bros., Discovery, the streaming platform HBO Max, which is now just called Max, they deleted dozens of exclusive original television shows from their servers.
These were shows that existed nowhere else in the world, right?
Nowhere else. They were digital exclusives. They had no DVD or Blu-ray releases.
But why would a media company destroy its own media? I mean, they spent millions of dollars making those shows.
To save money on residual payouts to the actors and writers, and to cut server licensing fees.
Wow.
Under the tax codes and union contracts, as long as the show is available on the platform, they have to pay out residuals. So by deleting the shows, they effectively uncreated the art. It was more financially viable to erase it from human existence than to keep it available to the public.
This is where we really need to dive into the legal framework allowing this to happen. The source material references a fascinating piece in the Cardozo Law Review by legal scholar Natalie Banta. She outlines the rise of what she calls digital feudalism. And I have to say, I used to think of terms of service agreements as just annoying pop-ups, but the historical parallel here is intense.
It really is. To truly understand digital feudalism, we have to look back to the legal structures of the year 1066.
Okay, take us back.
When William the Conqueror invaded England, he instituted a strict hierarchical feudal system. Legally, the king owned all the land in the entire country, every square inch.
He owned everything.
He leased massive tracts of it to his loyal tenants-in-chief, who then subdivided it to the mesna lords, who pushed it all the way down to the peasants and serfs. The serfs lived on the land, they worked the land, they built their homes on the land, and they died on the land.
But they owned nothing.
They owned absolutely nothing. They were completely at the legal mercy of the Lord, who could revoke their access at any time for any reason.
The parallel is almost too perfect, honestly.
Yeah.
Today, big tech companies, the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles, the Disneys, they are the kings.
Yes.
They own the servers, they own the software platforms, they own the digital land. And we, the users, we are the modern serfs. We toil on their platforms, we generate the data, we upload our family photos, we pay the monthly subscription fees, but we own absolutely nothing.
You're just a tenant. Right. You don't own your Gmail account. You don't own the Kindle books you supposedly bought for $14 each. You don't own the downloaded music on your smartphone. You just hold a revocable license to access them, granted by the king.
Precisely. We are legally bound by adhesion contracts, those massive 50-page terms of service agreements that nobody actually reads before clicking, except
Nobody reads them.
no one. And these contracts legally block us from actually possessing our digital lives.
Yeah.
And the most disturbing legal reality of this shift becomes apparent when we look at inheritance and death.
This part blew my mind.
In the feudal era, it took hundreds of years of struggle until the year 1290, with the passage of the statute Quia Emptors, for commoners to finally win the legal right to substitute themselves.
Substitute themselves. Meaning what exactly?
Meaning they could finally transfer or devise their property to their heirs without the lord's explicit permission. It severed the infinite chain of lordship. It was a monumental victory for human rights and the entire concept of modern private ownership. Wait, let me make sure I'm understanding the legal weight of this. You're telling me that a medieval peasant in the late 1200s had more legal right to pass down a wooden chair or a plot of dirt to their children than a modern citizen has to pass down a $5,000 digital iTunes movie library.
That is entirely accurate. The legal structure of modern tech contracts is actively reverting our fundamental property rights back to the 11th century.
That is insane.
When you die, your Kindle library does not pass to your spouse in your will. The license simply terminates upon your death. Your digital movie collection reverts back to the corporation. Even physical hardware is moving this way.
Oh, right, like the phones.
Yeah, Apple now heavily pushes consumers into ongoing upgrade programs where you are essentially leasing your iPhone on a perpetual monthly plan rather than owning the device outright.
We've surrendered our property rights without even realizing it, just for the convenience of not having to carry a CD wallet.
What we know for certain in the legal field is that property law always mirrors a society's deepest values. By stripping away the right to devise property upon death, by replacing the traditional concept of fee simple absolute, which means true total ownership, with a fragile digital tenancy, these corporations are hoarding immense cultural and personal wealth.
They hold all the cards.
They are centralizing total control over the artifacts of our lives. We are witnessing the rise of a modern digital aristocracy.
But if corporations control the physical servers, and they write the legal contracts dictating access, what happens when they decide to start fundamentally altering the history stored on those servers?
That is the next logical step.
Because we've talked about accidental decay and we've talked about profit-driven deletion. But according to the available sources, there's an alternative theory that is significantly darker.
Yes, the introduction of artificial intelligence as a mediator of truth completely changes the landscape.
The Our America Foundation has been aggressively sounding the alarm about AI fundamentally rewriting history. They draw a direct, undeniable line to George Orwell's novel, 1984. In that book, Winston Smith works in the Ministry of Truth. His entire job is to constantly manipulate historical records, rewriting old newspaper articles to justify whatever the totalitarian party is doing in the present day.
Who controls the past controls the future.
Exactly. That's the most famous line from the book. As AI systems ingest these unimaginably vast databases of human knowledge, the interpretation of what is true begins to shift in real time.
We are seeing AI act as an active intermediary between us and the historical record. But that intermediary is structurally, mathematically unreliable.
Unreliable how?
A recent investigative piece in The Walrus highlighted how Google Search, which is, the foundational navigational tool for the entire internet, is fundamentally breaking down because of AI integration. They cite an instance where Google's new AI overview feature actually hallucinated sunset times in Colorado.
I remember seeing screenshots of that.
It confidently told users the sun had already set, while those users were literally standing outside looking at the sun still high in the sky.
It's a small, almost funny error on the surface, but it exposes a massive vulnerability. I mean, if the dominant search engine on the planet is confidently hallucinating basic, empirically verifiable astronomical facts, what is it doing to complex, nuanced historical events?
To understand why it does this, you really have to understand how a large language model works. An LLM doesn't query a database of verified facts. It maps semantic relationships in high-dimensional vector space.
That's just doing math.
Exactly. It generates text by calculating the statistically most probable next token, or word, based on its training data. It has no concept of truth, only statistical probability. So sunset in Colorado gets mapped to a probable time output completely detached from the user's real-time clock or empirical reality.
And the damage to the broader information ecosystem is compounding rapidly. Because AI doesn't just hallucinate answers, it parasitically feeds on the infrastructure of the open web to do it, right?
Yes, it scrapes sites like Wikipedia, synthesizes the information, and generates an instant answer right on the search page.
Which means users get what they need and never actually click through to the original Wikipedia article.
Which starves Wikipedia of the web traffic it desperately needs to survive. And without that traffic, they don't get the visibility required to drive the donations that keep their nonprofit servers running.
So it's killing its own host.
The AI is literally consuming the physical infrastructure of its own knowledge base. When the source material dies, the AI will only have other AI-generated content to train on, leading to a phenomenon researchers call model collapse, where the outputs eventually degrade into total nonsense.
But the theory goes even deeper, and this is where it gets really dark. As noted in several prominent Reddit discussions analyzing this trend, the modern method of suppressing truth isn't necessarily scrubbing files from a server like Winston Smith did in 1984. It's a tactic called flooding the zone.
This is a critical distinction in the evolution of censorship. You don't need to burn a paper record or delete a digital file if you can drown the public in so much conflicting, synthetic AI-generated noise that they completely forget what they were looking for in the first place.
I'm picturing that robot librarian metaphor again. It's not just that the library is burning down. It's that the librarian is a malfunctioning robot who is actively hallucinating millions of fake books, printing them instantly, and throwing them at your head while you're desperately trying to find the exit.
That is a terrifyingly accurate way to picture it.
You can't find the real book because you're buried under a mountain of plausible-sounding fakes.
Supporters of this theory suggest that this is the natural evolution of censorship in the digital age. In Orwell's vision, people were unpersoned. They were meticulously erased from every photograph and physical document.
Removed.
Today, a controversial event or a dissenting person might not be erased at all. They might just be buried under a million synthetic AI-generated variations of the story. The truth becomes entirely indistinguishable from the noise.
It just exhausts people.
It creates a state of pervasive societal apathy. The public just gives up trying to find the real source material because the effort required to verify anything is simply too monumental.
But surely the news media, the professional journalists, whose literal job it is to write the first draft of history, surely they're keeping safe, secure backups of the truth. I mean, I used to assume major outlets like the New York Times or local city papers had some master server vault where everything is perfectly cataloged. We can rely on them to maintain the record, right?
This brings us to a stark contradiction between what the public believes about the permanence of the internet and the terrifying reality behind the scenes. The public operates on this deeply ingrained myth of permanence.
We assume the internet is an indestructible titanium vault.
We do. But according to a massive eye-opening report from the Reynolds Journalism Institute, digital news preservation is actively collapsing across the industry.
The findings in that report are incredibly grim. Because of the financial collapse of the traditional ad-supported news model over the last 2 decades, newsrooms across the country have systematically fired their librarians and archivists to cut costs.
The human element is gone.
The actual human beings whose sole job was to carefully catalog and preserve the daily record of our cities and towns are just gone. In their place, newsrooms now rely entirely on content management systems, or CMS platforms.
And from a database architecture standpoint, this is an absolute disaster for preservation. A CMS is designed for rapid web publishing. It is essentially a digital cannon meant to fire content onto the internet as fast as possible to capture trending clicks.
It's about speed, not storage.
It is absolutely not designed for long-term archival storage.
I want to understand the database logic of this. Why is a CMS so bad at saving things? If the text is typed in, shouldn't it just stay there?
Because an article in a CMS isn't a single, flat file like a Word document. It's a complex relational database using SQL.
Okay.
The text of the article lives in one database table. The author's name lives in another. The date and category live in another. The photos are usually hosted externally in an Amazon S3 bucket.
So it's all in pieces?
Yes. When you load the web page, the CMS uses primary keys to stitch all these disparate elements together dynamically in real time. But technology moves fast, and CMS platforms become obsolete. When a newsroom inevitably has to migrate from a legacy CMS to a new one, the migration process is notoriously brutal.
The links get severed.
Exactly. Vast amounts of historical news content are simply lost in the transfer. Or, crucially, the content is stripped of its metadata.
What happens when the metadata is gone?
Well, metadata is the underlying tagging, the specific author, the exact timestamp, the geolocation that makes a file searchable. Without metadata, a digital file is practically invisible to search engines.
It's just floating in the void.
It's like throwing a specific grain of sand onto a beach and trying to find it again. Furthermore, the multimedia, the embedded photos, the interactive graphics, the video players often break completely during these database migrations because the new system doesn't support the old file paths.
It is a ticking clock.
It is a ticking clock that can strike midnight at any moment a server dies or a migration is botched by a stressed IT department.
So the primary creators of our history are losing their own archives. But what about the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine? That's everybody's backup, right? Whenever a politician deletes a controversial tweet or a company scrubs a web page, We all go to the Wayback Machine to find it.
The Internet Archive is an absolute treasure of human civilization, but they are fighting an unwinnable, multi-front archival war. Legally, they are currently being sued by major book publishers over copyright claims regarding their digital lending library.
A lawsuit that threatens their very financial existence.
Exactly. And on the technological front, because of the rise of AI, news sites and digital platforms are actively blocking the Wayback Machine's automated web crawlers.
Wait, why would news sites block the archive from saving their history? That seems counterproductive.
Because they are terrified of AI. Websites use a simple text file called robots.txt to tell automated web crawlers what they are allowed to look at. In a desperate effort to prevent AI companies from scraping their articles to train language models for free, publishers are locking down their sites.
Oh, I see.
But in doing so, they are broadly blocking all crawlers, including the archival bots from the Wayback Machine. In an effort to protect their copyright from Silicon Valley, they are intentionally blinding the only reliable historical backup the internet has ever had.
It is a massive, interconnected house of cards sitting in a wind tunnel. And it doesn't even take a systemic failure or a lawsuit to bring it down. Look at the BBC report we have in the sources about the 158-year-old company that was utterly destroyed overnight.
That case is terrifying.
A company that survived a century and a half of history, 2 world wars, multiple economic depressions. And it was forced to lay off 700 people and shut its doors forever in a matter of days. Why? Because of a ransomware gang.
And how did that highly sophisticated, devastating attack vector actually start? One weak password.
Just one password.
A single compromised credential allowed malicious actors to gain entry, escalate their privileges, move laterally across the internal network, and deploy military-grade encryption across the company's entire digital infrastructure.
Everything was locked?
Everything they needed to function, client records, financial data, internal communications, was locked behind a cryptographic wall, and they couldn't afford the ransom. They couldn't recover.
Critics point out that we suffer from this massive blind spot. We think our data is safe because it's stored in a massive billion-dollar Google or Amazon data center. But the philosopher Michel Foucault wrote about the concept of counter-memory, which basically shows us that whoever controls the archive dictates power.
That's the core of it.
If only profitable, algorithm-friendly data is preserved by these tech giants, and if the independent nonprofit archives are sued into oblivion or blocked by robots.txt, we lose the human element of our history entirely. We lose the messy, unprofitable, controversial, true historical record.
So if hard drives naturally rot, the cloud is just a fancy marketing word for leasing space on a billionaire's fragile server. The news media is dynamically destroying its own archives, and the internet is fundamentally vulnerable to both AI noise and ransomware. How do we actually save human history from a digital dark age?
That brings us to perhaps the most surprising, almost paradoxical revelation of this entire deep dive. Because the solution to surviving the ultimate hyper-advanced technological crisis is strictly analog.
It really is.
The most disturbing detail of the digital age is that the only truly secure, foolproof way to save our future is to physically regress to the past.
We are talking about microfilm.
I mean, I literally laughed when I read this in the sources. I pictured an old spy movie from the 1960s with a tiny camera hidden in a lighter.
It sounds absurd on the surface, but the science behind it is undeniable. Microfilm was originally invented in 1839 during the very early experimental days of photography.
Wow, 1839.
It was famously used via carrier pigeons to smuggle massive amounts of written messages over enemy lines during the 1870 Franco-Prussian War. And today, microfilm is making a massive, silent comeback at the highest levels of global archival preservation.
Okay, I love this angle. To survive the AI apocalypse, Russian ransomware gangs, and Amazon cloud servers spontaneously dying, we are literally going back to carrier pigeon technology. It's like discovering that the ultimate weapon against a hyper-advanced cyber alien invasion is just a really good number 2 pencil.
It's the ultimate failsafe because digital data relies on dozens of layers of complex proprietary technology just to be read. You need a power grid, a functioning motherboard, a specific operating system, the correct codecs, and the exact application software.
All of which can fail.
Right. But microfilm is an entirely analog medium. Modern microfilm uses silver halide crystals suspended in gelatin on a highly durable polyester base. According to the ISO 18901.201 standard, properly stored microfilm has a certified life expectancy of 500 years.
5 centuries.
5 centuries.
And it has no bit rot.
Zero bit rot. A cosmic ray cannot flip a microscopic picture of a document. It cannot be hacked by a cyber gang. It cannot be hit with ransomware. It cannot be silently altered or hallucinated by a generative AI.
Because it's completely physical.
It is entirely air-gapped from the internet. And most importantly, it requires absolutely zero proprietary software or silicon hardware to read. If global civilization collapses, or if Apple simply goes bankrupt in 50 years and their software ecosystem vanishes, all you need to read a reel of microfilm is a light source and a magnifying glass.
It provides absolute physical proof in an era of digital manipulation.
Exactly. Governments and institutions are quietly recognizing this too. Archives in Germany, for example, are currently taking their most vital, irreplaceable cultural heritage, writing it from vulnerable digital files onto physical microfilm, and storing those reels in the Barberstollen.
What is the Barberstollen?
It's a massive, deep underground vault in the Black Forest. It's a former silver mine that was converted into a highly secure archive, sealed behind granite and massive steel doors, designed specifically to survive a direct nuclear strike.
A nuclear bunker for microfilm.
They currently hold over 1 billion images of German cultural history down there. They are treating physical analog preservation as a matter of urgent national security.
Yeah, and we are seeing this push for sovereignty on the digital front as well, right? Governments are waking up to the dangers of relying entirely on American tech monopolies.
Yes, the geopolitical implications of digital feudalism are massive. France is taking major legislative and infrastructure steps to establish digital sovereignty. They are moving civil servants to domestic encrypted messaging apps like TeachApp rather than relying on WhatsApp or Telegram.
To keep the data in-house.
Right. They are pushing the utilization of domestic search engines like Quant, which explicitly doesn't track users or sell behavioral data to foreign brokers. They are realizing that dependence on foreign tech platforms is a strategic vulnerability. They are starting to treat digital information and the physical infrastructure of national memory as a sovereign asset that must be protected at all costs, not just outsourced to the lowest bidder in Silicon Valley.
So we have this massive, undeniable divergence happening right now. The general public is blindly trusting the cloud, uploading their entire lives to servers they don't own, assuming it will be there forever.
Right.
Meanwhile, the archivists, scientists, and governments who actually understand the terrifying fragility of the system are burying microfilm in nuclear bunkers and building sovereign, isolated tech infrastructure.
This raises an incredibly important question for you, the listener, to deeply consider. What do you actually own?
That's the real question.
Look at your life right now. Your family photos, your financial documents, your favorite films, the books you've highlighted and loved, the messages from loved ones who have passed away. If you do not possess a physical, offline copy of the things that matter to you, you are entirely trusting a megacorporation to care about your personal history more than they care about their quarterly profit margins.
And as we've seen throughout this investigation today, that is a very, very dangerous bet to make.
It's a bet you will eventually lose.
Thousands of years from now, archaeologists will dig up our era. They will easily brush the dirt off the stone tablets of the ancient Sumerians and read the cuneiform. They will unroll the dried parchment of the Middle Ages and read the ink. But when they dig up our massive, multi-billion-dollar data centers, they won't find our art, our history, or our truths. They will just find billions of pieces of decomposing plastic, rusted metal, and dead silicon. Will we be remembered as the most advanced, interconnected civilization in human history? Or will this entire century simply look like a dark, blank space in the human timeline?